Okay, amazing. Well, I'm very excited to be here today with the incredible Jenna Lowe. Jenna is a human design and gene keys master, and she's an incredible human being as well. She is a channel for divine wisdom. She alchemizes the challenges we face that stand in between us and our purpose in life. And as a projector in human design, she really sees to the depths of who you are and gives you practical tools to align with the path of purpose that your soul chose for you. And alchemy is just in her DNA, and her unique perspective and interpretation of the human design world and astrology can support us so deeply in claiming our own transformations. So I had a one-on-one session with Jenna recently, and it was so incredibly helpful in basically helping me unlock my true gifts and what I came here to do, and really like the authentic expression of my own energy. And I think sometimes we get so conditioned by society to be a certain way from such a young age that we drift away and we lose track of who we really are authentically. And so I found human design and gene keys, and particularly my reading with Jenna, to really show me a lot of that authenticity and help me bring that back to life and go through this deconditioning process, which I think is, a very long term process, but it's kind of finding our way back to our true authentic selves and to wholeness and to our unique gifts, talents, and energy that we came here to express in the world. So, our reading was incredibly powerful, and I found the tools of human design and gene keys to be particularly powerful because it's almost like they're a more detailed and nuanced expression of astrology. So I really found astrology helpful to give me the broader information about myself and my path. But I think human design and gene keys really gets into the details and the more practical steps we can actually take that is more informative and helpful to us. So I want to begin by asking you, Jenna, what is human design and gene keys, and how does it relate to astrology?
Wow, what an introduction. I think you really covered everything, was just like how bringing us back to our authentic selves, and honestly like watching you right now and how you are shining authentically and stepping into like what you've always dreamed of doing is just really inspiring to watch.
Oh,
So
thank you.
you're welcome. So basically with astrology, we are looking at our blueprints, and in human design as well. We're looking at our blueprints from the moment that we are born. And human design adds another layer to this, where we are also looking at kind of when our bodies formed. They say like the soma has formed in our bodies about 88 days before we were born in the womb. So we are looking at the planetary placements that 88 days before and then at the time of our birth, whereas astrology is just covering what we see at the time, or the codes that we got at the time of our birth. But what's beautiful about human design is it incorporates many, many different ancient wisdoms and the science nerd in me as well, quantum physics. So
Mm.
it has like this whole big all-encompassing wisdom that is within it. And that's why like I really took to it, is because like, yes, it's not just the spiritual aspects, but there's actual science to it too. And they call it the science of differentiation, because every single one person cannot have the same chart. And so
Mm.
like even if you're born 20 seconds later from somebody who was in the same hospital as you, it still can be slightly different. And so it's all about knowing and learning just how unique we are, and then taking those codes, because the gene keys are basically the planetary placements in human design and the gates that they're activating in your chart. And it's going even deeper with what human design gives you. So it's very similar where gene keys is like what your gates are in human design, but it gives you like a very deep understanding and how it relates to your DNA and different body parts of yours and the amino acids it activates in your DNA, which is
Mm,
really, really awesome and crazy at the same time to think about.
definitely.
Yeah, that's like the really big deep science part of that as well, along with the neutrino stream, which I won't get into here, but that's another fun thing to dive into as well. But with Gene Keys, what's really cool about it is that you are looking at almost three different frequencies that you can embody within each gene key that you have activated. Now, that's not to say that every single person has every single gene key within them. It's just whether or not it's activated and has a consistent energy. And that's where you look on your human design chart to see, okay, is this gate or gene key defined? I have consistent energy with this frequency. And I can either choose to be in the shadow, which is the lower frequency, the gift frequency, which is in the middle, or the city, which is the highest frequency. So hopefully
Mhm.
that kind of gives a very brief synopsis of what you can see between human design and the gene keys and astrology as well.
Yeah, I found because I've been studying human design and gene keys for a few years now, and I find it's very multi-layered and can be very overwhelming to the beginner, which is
Mhm.
why I think, in the beginning stage, having that one-on-one, like that person who knows the system, translate it for you, it almost like helps you collapse time and just get to that understanding a lot quicker. That's
Mhm.
something I wish I did. But even having studied human design and gene keys for 3 or 4 years now, I just found so much incredible value in our conversation and our reading because you looked at things the way I have never looked at it. And there's a lot in the human design textbooks that aren't there. There's a lot of textbooks on human design and they can tell you what gates mean what and what channels mean what, but you're not just this or that. You're a whole package of everything put together.
Yeah.
So it's also reading your energy as a whole and reading your chart as a whole as well. And that's something that I really gained a lot of value out of our reading, but we'll get into that a bit later as well. And I wanted to ask, I should mention here for everyone that you will need your birth time to find your chart for human design and gene keys. And if you don't know your exact birth time, you can use a pendulum to work it out or go see someone who can use a pendulum to work it out. And it is totally possible to do that. I've actually done it for people and then they've ended up finding their birth certificates and it has been super, super
Wow.
accurate. So
You
it's
should add
totally
that
possible to do.
rectification to your services.
Yeah, totally. But it's really important to know what you're doing when you're doing it to make sure you get accurate information. But it's totally possible, so don't despair if you don't know your exact birth time. Now, I want to ask you, Jenna, what in your chart helps point us to our life's purpose?
So there's a few key placements here, and you'll see in a lot of the human design books, if you are even online, if you're diving into it a little bit, the talk about the incarnation cross. And what
Mm-hmm.
that is we have two, like I said, you have the planets at the time you were born, where they were, and then you have the planets where they were in the sky 88 days before you were born.
Mm-hmm.
And so we call this the conscious side, where the planets were where you were when you were born. That is the conscious or the personality side. And then 88 days prior in the womb is the design side or the unconscious side. So you have double placements when you look at your chart. And so the incarnation cross is both sun placements and both earth placements. And it's basically like taking the heavens and your soul purpose, like what you came here to be, and like grounding it down to the earth. And so with gene keys, this kind of the incarnation cross encompasses those four different placements. But the top one would be your conscious sun, and that would be your life's work. And then the bottom one would be your unconscious earth, which is actually your purpose. But your life's work is like how you take this soul purpose and then actually live it out into the world. And so that's like, I would say the first key placements to look at is this incarnation cross. And then the next one would be probably your moon placements. And I always like to look at both because they both give a lot of information. Your moon is like the motivation or the inner motivation and drive that you have to work towards your purpose. Then we have the both north nodes, which would be
Mm-hmm.
like the path to destiny. It's almost like pushing yourself out of your comfort zone so that once you get onto this north node path, it actually will align you towards your purpose. And then the final thing that I would almost look at as well would be your Mercury placements, because Mercury is what you're here to share with others, what you're here to teach others. And so if you tie like all of those together with a nice little neat bow, you can kind of get a glimpse into what really you could call your soul purpose. Now, I do
Mm-hmm.
like to say that it's not one size fits all definition, like in a box. However, it's taking the keys from these frequencies and then finding the embodiment within yourself, because it's a path that, yes, like your soul chose this for you, but you get to choose how you walk it.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. And should we go through an example just to ground this a little bit?
Sure. So let me bring up your chart. So with you, you have your conscious sun is in gate 19. And what gate
Mm-hmm.
19 is, it's called the gate of wanting. This is a gate that is in your root center. So it's a very primal gate. It actually is like the reminder that we get to be humans having a human experience in the world that we live in, but that we're also connected to nature. And so it's like taking care of the survival needs, the basic survival tasks that we have to do. But what's beautiful about this gate is actually the gate of the healer. And so
Mm-hmm.
this is a gate that your life's work, bringing your soul's purpose out into the world, is feeling into that sensitivity of being a healer. And so
Mm-hmm.
that's one way that you can actually physically express your soul's work or your life's work, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or being a healer. And so the
Mm-hmm.
shadow here is codependency. And this isn't necessarily like codependency, like let's say in a relationship. This is codependency in the fact that maybe you tend to you tend to externalize important decisions. So,
Mm-hmm.
for example, let's say at the doctor, like you're kind of giving your power away, like you're not trusting
Mm-hmm.
yourself. I know we've talked about this before. I have this gate defined as well in my moon, one of my moons. And I notice this, especially when I'm at the doctor, but I've had this rash on my legs since I was pregnant with my most recent child and can't get rid of it. I have no idea what it is. It's like my hormones are going crazy and I go to the doctor and I just mention it. And of course, the first thing was to prescribe me something. And I just, I was like, nope, that's okay. I'll deal with it myself. I'll know how to deal with it. It's got to be something with what I'm putting in my body. And that's, I'm not gonna go and put some drugs on my legs when I don't know. It's just not, I'm not feeling into it. But when we tend to
Mm-hmm.
externalize like our power or externalize where we should be independent in our choices and feeling into
Mm-hmm.
our own intuition of what is correct for us because we have
Mm-hmm.
that wisdom inside of us, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so, tapping into the gift here would be listening to your intuition, tapping into the frequency of the healer, of the shaman, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then, so when we switch and we go down to your purpose key, which would be your unconscious earth, this is the gate number 2, which is the direction of self. This is in your G center. And if you remember, your G center was really, really defined.
Mm-hmm.
So you have a lot of work between actually your G center and your root. a lot of work here to do about being your authentic self. Like that's a big message for you, is not
Mm-hmm.
falling into the trap of what others want for you, but doing what makes you
Mm-hmm.
happy and authentically shining your light, right? So,
Yeah, that's really funny because I've really seen the theme of both of those be
mhm,
so central in my life. Like when I was younger, I would, because as kids, you're like, oh no, the adults know better. Other
mhm,
people know better. The teacher knows better. Like you just kind of condition. And of course, when you're very young, often they do, but sometimes we kind of carry that with us for a lot longer than we needed to. And same with me in a medical context. When I was in my early 20s, I broke my arm and I had a couple of stitches and inside and I had a cast on. And I really felt like one of the stitches was getting infected and it was really sore. I was getting a bit fevery. And when I told the doctors, they're like, oh no, there's nothing wrong. You'll be fine. It's just in your head. And I was like, oh, okay, it's just in my head. And then, a week or two later, when they took it off, lo and behold, it was super infected and I had to go
mm,
on antibiotics. So, it was that whole thing of just remembering that I know my body better
yeah,
than anyone else
mhm,
and just taking back that sovereignty. And that is something that, it took me until my Saturn return or after my Saturn return to really, really get on a cellular level to do that and actually start doing that in my life. But I've found these themes of like codependency and authenticity to really be woven throughout my life as very key teachings for me to embody. And same with the authenticity, like I was again very conditioned to go down one path
mhm,
and it's only now post Saturn return that I'm kind of, and Saturn return for anyone who's not sure, it's something that happens between the ages of about 26 and 30, where Saturn returns to the original place it was on your birth chart when you were born. And basically, it often marks this period of great change. So, if you look back in your life, maybe the ages of 27 to 30, you kind of went into that time period one person and came out a different person. So basically I'm just talking about that time frame of your late 20s when you start finally kind of getting yourself together. And it's really since that period that I've kind of been coming back into my authenticity, which if I really think back a really long time to when I was, a child, like preschool age, that's what I inherently had. I inherently was extremely creative. I was inherently very embodied and very sensitive and very in touch with my emotions and all of those things. So it's nice starting to get back into that authenticity. And the great thing about the gene keys is what you're just saying. It's almost like it helps you shine a light on the path that you're on, because it's almost like you can't help to be on your path of the gene keys or of human design, but it's the question of which frequency out of those three frequencies you're in. Are you in the shadow of codependence? Are you in the shadow of giving away your power? And are you in the shadow of being so inauthentic that you're just doing what the people around you want to do? Or are you in that gift frequency where you're coming into yourself, you're coming into independence, you're
mhm,
coming into your authenticity? And the way I understand it, it's like you aim for the gift and you live in the gift. And if you live in the gift long enough and you expand your consciousness for long enough time, you end up in the city. Like the city is gifted to you and
yes,
the gift is what you gift to the world. So, and the city in those, sometimes the words can be very, not necessarily misleading, but a bit vague, in that the city of my life's work is sacrifice. But really, what that means is being able to go from codependence to independence, which is the
mhm,
gift, to that interdependence of basically like not being so attached to my own identity and
right.
instead merging with other people, which is why acting is such a amazing expression of my life's work, because it's like I get
Yes.
to merge my energy with the energy of this character, embody it, put it on, and kind of express that character for a little while and then come back into myself as well. And it's kind of this merging between self and other. And I'm really realizing in this chapter of my life, after being hyper independent for a really long time, that, it is okay to partner up with people, and there's people in this world that are, here for me and, my people. And
Mm-hmm.
that is even better than the hyper independence that I was in. So, this beautiful interdependence is like the city of that frequency. So, hopefully, that helps. That example helps ground these words for people, because it's such an intellectual process. The gene keys is very scientific. It's about your essentially the strands of DNA that are activated in you. So it can get very heady and analytical. So to ground these, which is why I found our reading so helpful, because I've been able to put these puzzle pieces together since our reading. Because before that, it was all kind of floating in the ether. And now I've been able to ground it into actual practical guidance and usefulness in my life. So yeah, it's been
Okay,
great.
that's so
So,
fun. Yeah, that's something that I
yeah,
like to do too, is like when I'm giving you the keys, it's like, okay, how can you take this and then practically apply it as well?
yeah,
There's some tools that can help you tap into those frequencies, or like when you get in the shadow, it's all about awareness, honestly. Like when you get
mm-hmm,
in that shadow, it's like, oh wow, I'm in that codependency frequency right now. Like, okay, I'm aware of it. What can I do now to kind of bring myself back?
mm-hmm, yeah, exactly. Awesome. So I think that was helpful as an example. So I wanted to ask a clarifying question. And is there anything in our charts that tells us or helps guide us on what we should actually be doing? Like, what is our zone of genius?
So that honestly it is the incarnation cross. So when you're reading deeper into the gene keys, you can actually, for those on YouTube, the Golden Path is the series of books that brings you through your gene keys. And so your
Mm-hmm.
zone of genius is basically like the first path that you can
The
take.
genius sequence. Okay,
Yes.
that makes sense.
And so this is your incarnation cross, but it's like a
Mm-hmm.
path. It's a they call it the activation sequence too.
Mm-hmm.
That
Mm-hmm.
is basically like following that path and taking each one by one to
Mm-hmm.
unlock that genius. And it's
Mm-hmm.
something that I brought myself through multiple times, just because like I feel like every time I get a new layer, I distill something new out of it, especially like with different things happening in my life, you know? So
Mm-hmm.
you get brought through your first, the conscious sun, which like what we talked about is your life's work, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then your conscious earth is like your grounding, your evolution. It's like it's like how you get set apart from others in different ways. And like the discomfort here is showing you how you can grow and how you can like take that next step out of the challenges and feelings of uncertainty. So that's kind of what the conscious
Mm-hmm.
earth is. Then
And
you're
is that the purpose in the gene keys?
no, that's not
The
actually.
radiance?
Nope, it's called evolution.
Evolution. Okay.
Mhm. Then your unconscious sun is the next one. That's the radiance. I love this one
Mm-hmm.
just because, like, this is your vitality. This is how you stay well. This is like, because it's the unconscious side, it's so in tune with your body and your vitality with your
Mm-hmm.
body. But it's also like, I don't know if you've heard of the Schumann resonance.
Mm-hmm.
That's the frequency of Earth, right? And so this is one that's so connected with the Earth frequency. So like
Mm-hmm.
tapping into the Schumann resonance and your gift or city level or frequency in this unconscious sun is like really powerful to your health, you know? And then the
Mm-hmm.
last one is your unconscious Earth, which is your purpose, like who you are
Mm-hmm.
here to be.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. And for those who are listening on the podcast, the book that Jenna was referencing is The Golden Path, which is a book by Richard Rudd. He's released a couple of like really thick textbooks. One's called The Gene Keys, and the other one's the white one. So the Gene Keys is blue, and the
Mhm.
other one's the white one, which is more about, yes, it's a blue one. That's the one I have. And then there's the white one, which is the 64 ways, and that's the contemplations on the gene keys. So that goes through each of the gene keys as well. So these books are all by Richard Rudd. And then he's done 3 separate books on the genius sequence, which is the incarnation cross that Jenna just spoke about, the love sequence, and the pearl sequence. And for those on YouTube, if you generate your Gene Keys profile, you end up with this map of dots, which tells you those 3 sequences, and there's overlap between the sequences as well. So you can generate your Gene Keys and Human Design profiles for free online. If you just Google it, enter your birth time, you get your chart, and then you can cross-reference against the Gene Keys and the gates in Human Design.
Yeah, like the gene
And
keys is like
it's
taking it one level deeper from
Yeah, yeah.
hmm
The way I see it, it's kind of like astrology is like the basic original octave, and then it goes human design is like the next kind of octave above that, and then gene keys
hmm
is like the next octave above that. And one's not better than the other. It's just different consciousnesses and different ways of kind of interpreting this information and getting to know ourselves on a whole deeper level, because sometimes, as I said, we kind of drift away from that society and things happen and we kind of drift away from who we really are. And these are just tools to kind of draw us back to our center and back to who we really are at the core, our authentic self expression. So I think they are beautiful tools to help us do that.
Definitely.
All right, so my next question is, how do we know when we're in alignment with our soul and our purpose?
Ooh, so I feel like this is very tied to those gift frequencies. And, you know, we talk a lot about the North Node and like that North
Mm-hmm.
Node path in astrology. Like that's been
Mm-hmm.
becoming much more popular lately.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, like I feel like I've just kind of really activated this within myself too, because I've been studying it. But then, like, it's one thing
Mm-hmm.
to actually like follow through on things, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's funny how when I stepped on that path, like, and made the conscious decision to do it, how everything just started falling into place. Everything.
Mm-hmm. Wow, that's awesome.
And so I would say it's like one, those are really great frequencies to tap into. So looking at your North Node placements in astrology,
Mm-hmm.
in human design, in your gene keys, the gift frequencies for sure. And so I'm gonna throw out a lot of things here. So if you're looking at your astrology birth chart, you want to notice the sign and the house, because those are going to tell you a lot about things that are, your North Node is very uncomfortable and
Mm-hmm.
can really push you outside of your comfort zone. And so it's like going to the edges of the box and kind of, poking yourself through just to kind of step on that path. So
Mm-hmm.
that's the first step. Then you want to go to your human design chart and you can look at both the conscious and unconscious, right? See what gates they're in, and then find those gates and what centers they're in, because the
Mm-hmm.
centers are going to give you information. So for example, with yours, Borska, you have your first one is gate 13, your conscious one, and gate 13 is
Mm-hmm.
back in your G center, your self center. So this is
Mm-hmm.
something that is, it's actually the gate of the listener. And
Mm-hmm.
so this is all about holding sacred space and like forming sisterhood and, trusting to let people in.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have, and like doing it authentically without putting on a show for those people. You know what
Mm-hmm.
I mean? So
Mm-hmm.
then gate 49 is in your emotional solar plexus. This is the gate of principles. And this is I'm sorry, yeah, in the emotional solar plexus. So this is all about like your own morals, your own vision, holding your cause, and, really diving deep into like a revolution of yourself. And with your North Node, you want to like make sure that you are willing to say no, learn how to
Mm-hmm.
say no, and, be careful not to take action from reaction. That would be like the shadow frequency, is that reactiveness.
Mm-hmm.
And so you have these different types of energies that you can tap into to take your North Node in, you're in Aquarius, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so your North Node in Aquarius one step further, and then you can look up the gift frequencies and the gene keys.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, awesome. That's really helpful. And on that note, we might just touch on briefly the south nodes. I think our discussion around the south nodes really helped because a lot of people naturally just want to kind of cast the south node into the shadow and say we shouldn't go there or we should move away from that.
Mhm.
And while there's definitely some validity to that, I think it is a lot more nuanced. And the way you explained it was really helpful for me. So, how would you recommend or suggest that we work with and look at our South Node placements?
So this was something that was coming to me. So as I was stepping onto this North Node path more recently, with your South Node. So I'll use myself as an example. So my North Node is in Aries, so it's all about like that independence and, being bold, taking risks, being courageous, and, standing up for my boundaries, right? And,
Mm-hmm.
realizing when they've been crossed and saying, okay, like this is not okay anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And which means if my North Node's in Aries, my South Node is in Libra. And so Libra is the negative tendencies of Libra are that codependence, are that, feeling like being needy or needing somebody else with you at all times, hanging on, clinging, and all that
Mm-hmm.
kind of stuff.
Yeah, trying to keep the peace and yeah,
Exactly.
not saying anything because you don't want to ruffle feathers. Yeah.
Exactly. Yep. 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 That's me right there in a nutshell. So when I took this a step further and I looked at the gates in my chart, I found that one of my south nodes was in my spleen, which is a gate of intuition. Or sorry, yeah, it's the center of intuition, but it's the gate 57, which is the gate of intuitive clarity.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I was able to look at that and I said, well, there's a gift in there. It's not
Mm-hmm.
a bad thing.
Mm-hmm.
And, for those, I don't think we said this already, but your South Node is like gifts that you were born with, these things that you've mastered in other lifetimes. It's something that you have very strong qualities with. And yeah, you
Mm-hmm.
can easily shift back into that comfort zone where it might be a little bit of the negative side or the shadow
Mm. The
frequencies,
shadow frequencies, yeah.
right? But you also have a gift there.
Mm-hmm.
And with this intuitive clarity, it's actually, and it's like, me coming into my own, I'm like, oh, whoa, I have the most intuitive gate in
Mm.
all of human design on my chart. And it's in my South Node. So this is something that I'm supposedly have mastered. And so it's something that I really like claimed and said,
Mm-hmm.
wow, okay, I really need to start trusting my intuition a little more. And when I
Mm-hmm.
started doing that and listening to, my spleen is very, very defined. So I have a lot of those different intuitive gifts there, which I've been really
Mm-hmm.
studying and building within myself, becoming aware of. I've always had them, right? It's just becoming aware of them.
Mm-hmm.
And when I started tapping into this intuitive clarity gift, it almost led me to the path of the North Node.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
putting my boundaries up, being bold and being courageous in a way that I didn't know was in me.
Mm-hmm.
And so
Mm-hmm.
this it's almost like your south node, when you embody that gift frequency, gives you the power to step into your north node.
Mm,
And that's how
mm-hmm,
I like to look at it. It's very empowering. It should be an empowering
mm-hmm.
thing. It's something that you're good at,
Yeah,
right?
it's almost like the fuel for your vision. It's
Mhm.
like the fuel, the sustenance for your journey towards the North Node.
Right, right.
Yeah, yeah, that's a beautiful way of looking at that and really empowering because it's kind of just like giving us another source of power
Mhm.
and giving us the ability to look at a part of ourselves and not cast it into our shadow, but to embrace the gifts that come with that, which
Right.
I think is a much more empowering way of looking at South Node placements. So that was really helpful. And there was quite a few powerful placements when you read for me that I wanted to talk about. As I said before, I have got about 30 pages of notes from our session. It was so in depth, it was so detailed. You were so incredibly well prepared for it. And there was just so much value and wisdom and guidance that I gathered from it. I think, in particular, the incarnation cross was really helpful because it kind of just gives you that overarching life direction, which is almost like a direction back to our authentic self and
Mhm.
then a direction forward into the world as our authentic self. And when we are in our authentic sort of self expression and power and energy, it's almost like that path just unfolds for us in this way that I just didn't expect it would. So I think that's something that our reading really helped me with is just embracing the parts of me that I was kind of taught to shut down from a really young age and
Mhm.
just letting them back out and just being okay with what that is and just kind of not worrying about what other people's judgments around my path might be. So I found the incarnation cross really helpful because, again, that's not covered in the books on human design that I've read. And also the archetype, which you pulled out of my incarnation cross, was really cool. For me, I think it was the authentically wise feminine healer.
Mhm.
And when you said that, I was like, part of me was like, oh, that's not me. And then a part of me was like, no, that is me. I've just been conditioned out of it. I've been conditioned out of my authenticity. When I was young, I was really smart and I was bullied a lot for being smart. And I noticed in myself that when I pretended I wasn't that smart, people would like me more. So that
Mhm.
was a conditioning from very early school age that I kind of tried to put a lid on the wisdom and my intellect and my capacity to just take all this information, process it, and apply it and use it powerfully in my life. And, same with femininity. I've been in my masculine for a really long time. Because we're conditioned that, women should be like, first it was women should be something else, and now women should be the CEOs and hustle and grind and be boss babes and stuff. And I think there's so much empowerment in that. And I think, again, like with everything, there's a shadow frequency of that where we kind of can either externalize our power and our self-worth onto our achievements and onto the money we earn or the titles that we have or what have you. It's that externalization of power and like a shadow frequency of that kind of hustle culture, I guess. And then the healer archetype, it's like, yes, people, when I talk to people, it's almost like, and they come to me with some issue or something that they're going through, and they talk to me and I talk to them and I share something that's helpful to them, that just comes naturally. I don't even think about it. Like someone could come to me without me knowing who they are. And it's like I just have this ability to give them what they need in that moment. And that's a really, again, that's like a gift that's not, always valued by the world. It's like, well, you can't, what is that?
Yeah.
It's not a doctor or engineer or accountant or architect, it's not. if it's not a profession, it's not valid. And, there's conditioning around that as well. So just allowing myself to really embrace that gift of the healer that I have as well. Like, I think, again, human design and gene keys, it's a tool. So for some people, it can be very overwhelming at first, but it's not meant to be another way to beat yourself up. It's meant to be a tool of empowerment. And I think that's why getting a reading from someone, because I think you can study gene keys and human design for an entire lifetime and still don't know everything. It's
Mhm.
just this incredibly complex system.
Mhm.
And it kind of is based, at least the gene keys, is on contemplation. So
Yeah.
it's based on like your own consciousness applying to a paradigm that exists and then expanding that and
Yeah.
applying that to yourself.
Yeah.
So I think that's why working with someone, particularly getting a reading, is just so beneficial because it kind of cuts through the years of study because I'm such a hermit and I'm quite intellectual. So I love getting into a textbook and learning things
That's our
myself.
two lines. I
Yeah.
know we have such similar charts. It's so funny.
Yeah, that's so cool. But yeah, I just found that was extremely helpful. And the explanation of the south nodes that you just gave, because I've my south nodes are in Leo,
Mm.
and and in the like for astrology in the ninth house, and that's the house of publishing and everything. And
Mm.
in my life, I'm like, oh, I was really drawn to writing and publishing my book. And, when I did that, I kind of like, oh, is that in the shadow frequency? And is this in the shadow frequency? And all that, but it's really not, because that's the gift. Because writing and speaking and delivering messages is something that comes so naturally to me, like speaking and self-expression and expressing and being on stage or being in front of a camera. Like, that's
Mhm.
where I come alive. Like, people find that daunting. Like, I love public speaking. I absolutely love being on a stage, sharing my messages with the world. That's like almost like my comfort zone for me, because
Mm.
of those Leo placements, and having like four different cameras shoved in my face and not being able to look at any of them is totally like natural to me. I just forget they're there, and like I'm focusing on this one other person that, is reading opposite me or acting opposite me, and we can just be in the moment. And yeah, it's almost like that is what comes easy and naturally to me. So why should I deny that of myself and, look at it in this very like fixed mindset of, oh no, I shouldn't do that because it's my south node. I don't think that's a very empowering way to look at things.
Yeah.
So I wanted to ask if you can share a bit more about the difference between the personality and the design side, so your conscious and unconscious placements.
Yeah. So, like I said, when you look at your human design chart and you download it from wherever it be, you're going to see these two columns on either side of this. We call it the body graph. So it's like this little
Mm-hmm.
silhouette of a person with different shapes and lines connecting it, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
on the sides of that body graph, you have all these symbols, and those are your planetary symbols. On the right-hand side is your personality side, which I've also said is your conscious side. So
Mm-hmm.
this is where the planets were at the moment that you were born in the sky, right? Or not when you were born in the sky, where the planets were in the sky at the moment you were born.
Mm-hmm.
Nuances, right? Then
Mm-hmm.
with this, these are qualities, because we call this the conscious side or your personality side. These are the things that are ruled by the mind. These are things that we are aware of. These are things that, like, if we tap into the gift or the shadow frequency, it's something that's very in our awareness. Like, we'll be able to much more easily figure out when or become aware of the shadow frequency here on this side than we were on
Mm-hmm.
the unconscious side. And
Mm-hmm.
so with this conscious side, since it rules the mind, it's something that you can really, it it's almost like, I'm just trying to think of like the best way I wanted to say this. It's almost like because you have so much awareness, this is like your first step. And that's why in the activation sequence of the genius, like you always start with your conscious sun, because your incarnation cross, those 4 placements that we were talking about, make up 70%
Mm-hmm.
of your energy.
Mm-hmm.
And then the rest of everything else makes up 30%, right? So when
Mm-hmm.
you have just 4 placements that are making up 70% of your energy, it's going to be something that you're very aware of, especially that conscious sun.
Mm-hmm.
Then on the other side, you have on the left-hand side your design side, which is your subconscious or your unconscious. So these
Mm-hmm.
are things, they say this is like when your body formed technically in the womb. I don't know like how like anatomically accurate that is with gestational time, but that's what they're saying. Like it's what was programmed in your DNA at that 88 days prior. So this represents the body.
Mm-hmm.
And that's like everything on that left-hand side of your chart, including those 4 arrows at the top. The 2 left arrows rule your body.
Mm-hmm.
this these are qualities that you're not necessarily always aware of. These are things that you might look at it and say, oh, I don't do that, and then catch yourself doing it and be like, oh, damn, I do that, right?
Mm-hmm.
So this is also things that other people may see in you more easily. Like other
Mm-hmm.
people observe these things in you because it's something that's just like so subconscious and in your psyche that you don't even realize that you're in a gift or a shadow here, right? So these are things that are a little bit harder to shift from the shadow to the gift frequency, only because we're not as aware of them. And
Mm-hmm.
so the whole first step in this, like we've talked about before, is becoming aware of it.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, especially the beautiful thing about that purpose sphere, which is your unconscious earth, not only is it your purpose, but it also is in the love sequence. And it's the first key in your love sequence, which is like how you're like your biggest shadow in your relationships. And so like realizing that and seeing that was
Yeah.
like for me, because
Yeah.
I was like, holy shit, I do that. I do
Mm-hmm.
that. And because it's unconscious, I was like, I had no idea I was doing it until I became
Mm-hmm.
aware of it. Like my it's what is it? Oh my gosh. See, I know what gate it is, but I'm blanking on my what the actual get that for me. Yeah, for you, what was it for you?
It
You
was two is unity. The city is
dislocation.
unity.
Yeah, so
Dislocation
like
is the shadow.
getting yourself isolated and disconnecting from others, right? And so that could be like a huge shadow that shows up in relations for you. Like you might pull back very, very easily.
Mm.
And it's not
Yeah.
something
And
you
I
even
need a
realize
lot.
you're doing.
Yeah, and I do need a lot of space, maybe as an Aquarius sun as well. I'm like, quite independent, quite, fine without other people. So I
Mhm.
think my shadow has been like, not asking for help when I needed it or not, yeah, just not reaching out when I was feeling some kind of way or whatever. So yeah, not asking for help.
Yeah. And so I always get my unconscious sun and my unconscious earth confused with the shadows there because they're both,
Hmm.
unconscious for me. So I'm not as aware of them. But the unconscious
Yeah.
earth for me is control. And
Hmm.
so when I feel like I'm losing control, like I almost get a little bit more controlling because and
Hmm.
that's a little bit of my OCD as well. That comes into play there.
Hmm.
But that is something that I like have this fear of it in my purpose as well. Like when I don't have control, it's like it's trusting everything, that everything's going to be working out just fine and
Hmm.
in divine timing and all of that. So it's that fear of losing control. And when I feel that fear, like, oh, I don't have control over this situation, or in
Hmm.
relationship, in this argument, I don't have control over this, it's like this fear
Hmm.
that almost comes out. And it's very interesting, like that one, just
Hmm.
because it has that duality as well.
Hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think, yeah, that's definitely a shadow that plays out in a lot of people, I think.
Mhm.
And yeah, the way I kind of see it is like your design side is almost like the shadows of it that are in, sorry, the lighting's doing something funny. The sun's just coming up here. It's like the unconscious side is more like the shadows that live in your subconscious mind that again you probably picked up from when you were really young before even before you can even remember. Like most of us don't really remember a lot before the ages of 5 or 6. So often the shadows in our unconscious side of our design are things that we picked up in like the first 7 years of our life that was when the subconscious mind was forming. So we have picked them up before and before our rational mind kind of was on board,
Mhm.
which only comes on board when we're about 12 years old. It starts to really start forming. So we're picking up all this messaging. We're misinterpreting a lot of things in the world that's happening around us. For example, a parent might be angry and yelling just generally, and we might take it personally and say think it's about us, and then that might create some form of wounding around codependency or whatever, and then we carry that with us and
Mm.
act it out in the world without knowing.
Yeah.
And so again, it's kind of helpful to self-reflect on those on the unconscious side as well, because a lot of those things won't be in your immediate consciousness, but once you think about it, you're like, oh yeah, I do that, or yeah, I can see where I'm in the shadow of that, or I can see where I'm not, that's not my tendency. So you'll, out of all those placements, there'll be some that resonate for you that you're like, oh yeah, I do tend to go into that shadow when I'm not feeling my best. And then some you might say, no, I'm quite comfortably sitting in the gift frequency because I've either worked through that or I
Mm.
haven't experienced anything that really drew me into the shadow frequency of that placement. So again, it's just another self-awareness tool that we can use for our own development and our own, basically our own healing, because when we're in those shadows frequencies, it affects no one more than ourselves. Like it affects us negatively. And yes, we can behave in not so amazing ways that affect other people, but ultimately that affects us too, because it isolates us, or it drives away the people that might actually be healthy or helpful for us. And then we get into this wounding, and then we are less likely also to reach out to people
Yeah.
who can help us. So I think it's again a very, very useful tool, especially to look at, well, to look at the frequency of both.
Yeah.
And one of the last questions I have for you, Jenna, is how do you work through those three sequences, genius, love, and prosperity? Do you have any tips of what we should look for in particular, or where we should start, or where they lead us?
Yeah, so they actually go in that order. It's the genius, then the love, then the prosperity. And so with the genius being, it's the activation sequence, right? So it's starting off with that genius. It's coming to understand what, like, the parts of you that are take up most space in you, right? That's 70% of your energy, even if those unconscious sun and earth placements, you're not necessarily as aware of, but it's coming
Mm-hmm.
back to those, and they take you through a specific path, and you study them, you contemplate them in that specific order, because each one has a pathway in between it, and it's almost like unlocking them, right? Unlocking that
Mm-hmm.
pathway to unlock the
Mm-hmm.
next one, right?
Mm-hmm.
So then your love is like all about relationships, self-love, your emotional intelligence, your actual intelligence, right? And
Mm-hmm.
how the interrelationships between you and other people, if it's a romantic relationship or otherwise, play out. And then the third sequence is your pearl sequence. And this is, I like to, this is like your prosperity, like it's like an
Mm-hmm.
activation of prosperity.
Yep.
So this one is really tapping into, like, especially if you're an entrepreneur, I highly recommend doing this one, but I do recommend going through all of them. Like, don't just go immediately to the pearl, because
Mm-hmm.
you have to get to know yourself. You have to get to know your zone of genius. You have to get to know how you relate to other people before you can
Mm-hmm.
unlock that prosperity.
Mm-hmm.
And, it's just like getting to know, how people, like how you attract people to you, like how you, they have one called the culture sphere. So like how you build community around yourself. So there's
Mm-hmm.
different things that you can look at in that one. Your branding, for example, would be in there
Mm-hmm.
as well. For those of you who want to know, it's your conscious sun plays a
Mm-hmm.
big role in your branding.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so and what's very interesting is in those books, it doesn't go over every single one of the planetary placements. There's only certain ones, I guess, that Richard read distilled when he was channeling this work, and
Mm-hmm.
not every single placement is in these sequences. So something that I like to do, and I know we talked about this, was that in our readings, or in our reading, I went over all of them, including like your Chiron
Mm-hmm.
placements, which
Mm-hmm.
are huge, and
Mm.
especially like a
Yeah.
huge teaching gift. And you can't get that on like a regular human design chart. So
Yeah.
that's really an important one that I love using in entrepreneurship as well, or even like, in regular life, it helps me understand myself a whole lot better.
Yeah, definitely. And that's a place where the astrology can kind of fill a
Mhm.
gap, I guess, or help us where human design or gene keys doesn't really exactly deal with that planetary placement because yeah, I think Chiron's a big one.
Yeah. And like knowing what
Mm,
gate and what gene key Chiron is
mm,
activating for you can
mm-hmm,
be tremendous.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And with the Pearl sequence, it's often helps us with the core blocks we have for
Mm.
abundance. And I think is that your unconscious Jupiter that
Yes. Yes. So like your conscious Jupiter is your harvest. It's like, I like that one
mm-hmm,
because you're reaping what you sowed, right? So you planted
mm-hmm,
all the seeds, and now you get to like, this is how I pull it back to me, right? This is how I
mm-hmm,
get to harvest everything. That's the pearl also, so they call it.
mm-hmm,
Then your unconscious Jupiter is like your abundance and your prosperity, right? And so
mm-hmm,
looking at that shadow is your biggest block to abundance.
mm-hmm,
So I know for me, mine is in the 63rd gate, and that block, that shadow is doubt. So doubt in any form,
mm-hmm,
whether that's like doubt something's going to happen or self-doubt in myself,
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
that is huge for me. And then for you, yours is gate 39. And with gate 39, that is, which is it's funny. Also, your Chiron. I remember we talked about that.
oh,
It's being able to be provoked very easily, or like, when people, you can tune into people's frequencies
mm,
very easily and their body
mm-hmm,
language, and letting them kind of push your buttons
mm-hmm,
and sensing what's in your energetic field. Like if somebody, like you can feel their frequency almost, and like
mm-hmm,
with people know how to push your buttons, and you also know how to push other people's buttons, right?
mm-hmm,
So it's, tapping into, that is a shadow of mine, that provocation, and then
mm-hmm,
shifting that into the gift of expansion and abundance, for
mm-hmm,
using it for your creative flow, or
mm-hmm,
provoking people in a very good way, pushing them outside of their
mm-hmm,
comfort zone into
mm-hmm,
their creative zone of genius.
mm-hmm.
So it's like tapping into, like shifting that shadow to gift there really unlocks your abundance.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. How interesting. Yeah, I find that, and the great thing about this is that it's so practically helpful. Like it's really shining a light on things that will actually make a huge difference in our life and giving us the guiding sort of light of how to go from the shadow to the gift frequency and really embody the version of ourselves and our energy that's going to get us where we want to go rather than kind of keep us stuck in some frequency that's not particularly helpful.
Right, right.
Hmm. And that's the Pearl sequence is connected to something that you have on offer, isn't it? Or
That I
can
have on what?
you, one of your new offers? Oh, is that one of the sequences is connected to one of your new offerings? Is that right?
Yes. So actually, I haven't even announced this yet, but I am going to be doing a program in the near future called Abundance Alchemy. And
Mm-hmm.
this is going to be like 10 keys to abundance that you can unlock in your in your human design chart, basically, not just gene keys,
Mm-hmm.
but in your whole human design chart. And we
Mm-hmm.
go over a lot of those different keys. And of course, the unconscious or the pearl sequence, unconscious Jupiter
Mm-hmm.
pearl sequence is part of that. But
Mm-hmm.
there's so much more in there that really like shifts you from,
Mm-hmm.
this state of lack and self-sabotage into
Mm-hmm.
that abundance and magnetizing state.
Mm-hmm. Because the way I've understood it is your pearl, which is in the middle of your pearl sequence, is one of the greatest, like, you know, parts of your magnetism.
Yeah. Yeah.
And for me, it's ironic because the gift is magnetism and the city is fluorescence
Uh-huh.
and the shadow is dullness. So, the pearl about magnetism is in my gene key of magnetism, which is really
Yeah.
interesting. So I'm like, well, how do I become magnetic by becoming magnetic? So that's not particularly like helpful direction wise. But when you go into the gene keys, which is why having the book or having a reading is so helpful because, you know, the words don't actually tell you a lot, and sometimes they're a bit vague, and sometimes I wouldn't say misleading, but you just can't capture a whole frequency in one word. And so that's what was attempted to be done, but you lose a lot of meaning. So that's why, fleshing out the understanding of what that frequency actually is really important by either studying the textbooks or having reading. Otherwise, you can get a bit lost in the verbiage.
And we all
Um,
experience it differently. Like we experience
mhm,
your experience, because I know what we both have gate 19. Like your experience with
mhm,
gate 19 is going to be different from my experience with gate 19, even
yeah,
if we can distill it to some keys that we may
mhm,
feel in the shadow and the gift and the city frequency. Like we're experiencing it differently just because of our different upbringings, and
mhm,
different
and the
experiences
rest of
we've
our
already had.
charts.
Right.
Mm, yeah. And that's why I liked having the reading because it kind of brought everything together.
Mhm.
Because, we're not a bunch of things in isolation, we're a whole person. We're not just, an arm and a leg and a reproductive system and a brain, we're this whole thing put together and it working in harmony. So it's also, synthesizing the different frequencies and bringing it all together and grounding it into like a practical way of, okay, here's a way forward, which is really helpful. So would you like to just take a moment to explain what current offers you have on?
Sure. So right now you can work with me by getting a reading. I offer a couple of different types of readings. I do basically like a level 1 reading, which is a foundational reading going over the basics of your astrology chart, the basics of your human design chart. Like that's like an introduction type of reading where we go over your type, your strategy, authority, your centers, and some stuff like that. Then the level 2 reading, which is what you had, Borshka, is like if you're familiar with that stuff already and you want to dive deep into every single planetary placement and how it's
Mm-hmm.
affecting you consciously and subconsciously in your gene keys, basically. So that those are like the main readings that I offer. I also do history readings and comparison charts, and what's the other one? Solar returns as well on both charts, because
Mm-hmm.
you have a solar return for your human design chart, which is fun.
Mm.
So then you have another thing that I just opened up, which I'll be doing every quarter now. So if you are an entrepreneur or are thinking about becoming an entrepreneur, I'm doing something called activated alignment, which is basically going over some really key placements in your chart, some static placements, but then looking at like how the transits through the 64 gates activate you and certain parts of different centers that you might not have access to. So like for example, in this quarter three coming up, I have a completely open throat, but I'm going to have a transit that's activating my throat. And so I know that's a really, really good time for me to do a master class, because that's
Mm-hmm.
really power, if
Mm-hmm.
you will. So it's just
Mm-hmm.
kind of knowing and getting that alignment of
Mm-hmm.
what the divine timing is of each of the things that you want to bring out into the world each quarter.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
that right now I have that for quarter three, but I'll be doing it quarterly from now on, limited spots
Awesome.
with those. But yeah, so fun stuff.
Mm-hmm. Great. And is the synastry reading for two people, like two charts read together?
Two
Or how
charts
does
read
that work?
together. You can come with someone or by yourself. I know I've had somebody do it for their partner before, and then somebody do it for one of their children too, like how you can interplay with
Mm.
the child, which I thought was really beautiful as well.
Oh, that's really good because, yeah, children have such unique, they're still in their authenticity. So it's really great to get to know them on a deeper level and understand how to bring out those gifts and, maybe help them with anything that's coming up for them as well. Yeah, that's awesome. Well, as you know, I found so much value in our call. I really, really, I'll be treasuring it forever. And I've been going back over it again and again. I think I've listened to it maybe 3 or 4 times and I'm still getting new things out of it. So it's
Oh.
honestly like a gift that just keeps giving. And it's super valuable to have another perspective and the placements explained in a different way so I can understand them better because honestly, I had read them in textbooks. I've got human design and text and Gene Key's textbooks, but and that gives you kind of, yeah, like a very basic introduction and a very basic idea, but it actually doesn't tell you what is actually the most important things to focus on, and it doesn't kind of help you with the interaction between the energies or the overall sort of overarching themes or anything like that. So it is extremely beneficial just to go. It's kind of like you trying to interpret your own astrology chart or whatever, which I think I didn't even bother doing at the start, and I just got a reading and it was honestly super mind blowing. And then with human design, because I was so interested in the topic, I'm like, yeah, I want to learn everything. But then I quickly, when I started doing that, I realized I could be reading this on this topic for 10 years and still just be kind of scratching the surface. So it's fantastic to have someone like you who's been living and breathing this for such a long time because it kind of just short circuits the process and gets you to straight to the things that matter without going through years of kind of a little bit fruitless research.
And it's hard too, like with the incarnation cross, as you were saying, that, it's not really out there that much. And when you do find
Mm,
them,
yeah.
it's like when I Googled mine, it was like, you're going to live your life purposeless and just like keep trying to constantly find a purpose. And I'm like,
Mm,
no, that's not me. And then
yeah.
when I did my process with myself, and that's when I came up with the archetype, honestly, because I was like,
Mm-hmm.
this is
Mm-hmm.
not who I am. And that's not what I'm distilling
Mm,
from what I'm reading and what I'm contemplating. That is not it.
yeah.
And so that archetype is really unique because it's
Mm,
just like, I find it more empowering than,
mm.
just walking around life aimless.
Yeah, I did the Google search on my incarnation cross and there's a couple of pages. I forget what they said, but I was none the wiser for having read them. And
Yeah.
I think the great gift in human design and Gene Keys specifically is that it really like helped me give myself permission to acknowledge and become aware of my gifts and the
Mhm.
things that do come naturally to me and the gifts that I do have. And it was just such a great confirmation of the path that I had already started to walk on, that yes, this is what, is my authentic path. And yes, I've taken a long detour to get there, but we are there. And now I've got all these gifts and all this awareness now in my toolbox going forward. So I can, you know, get more traction on things and not just be doing something because I heard someone else was doing it or it sounds like a good idea, but things that are actually in alignment with who I am as a person. And I just think that was really helpful. So thank you so much, Jenna, for sharing your wisdom with us today.
Thank you for
Um,
having me.
yeah, I will leave all the links. So this will be posted both to my podcast and Jenna's YouTube. So I will post all the links to where you can find Jenna in my show notes. And they'll also be in the description if you're watching this on Jenna's YouTube channel. You can also find Jenna at Jenna Low on Instagram and YouTube. And I'll also leave a link in the show notes too for people to book a reading for you, because honestly, it was so empowering and amazing. And I really hope that other people have the benefit of working with you too. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. It was a pleasure speaking with you and an honor to be on your podcast.
Oh, I'm so excited to have you as my first guest. I think people are going to be really blown away by this. So thank you so much.
Thank you.